everything is everything is interesting nowadays. If you haven't noticed, just every week there's something going on, be it about COVID or, just whatever. There just seems to be something constantly going on. It can be a little bit overwhelming. It can sort of wear on you. Relationships could be strained with family members or friends or people you go to church with. There was a the National Museum of African American History and Culture this week made a huge splash, shall we say. A huge splash as it pertains to making some news, and really, people really couldn't quite understand if they were being serious about this or if they were somehow being, if this was parody or if this was somehow being sarcastic, or if this was like some racist had hacked in to the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which is a part of the Smithsonian Institute and all of the museums in the National Mall. The Smithsonian is a conglomerate of a lot of different types of museums, but they're sort of the gold standard in the United States for, I guess, for keeping a record of history and culture within the United States. So they put out this I don't even know what you would call it. It's like an infographic. You have these infographics in a lot of places. You see them online. They're made to be spreadable. They're made so that they go around. They're easily shared and disseminate information. And it's part of a series on their website at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. It's called Talking About Race. And National Museum of African American History and Culture. And their desire to talk about race, I think, kind of backfired on them, because they put out an infographic that basically said there are aspects and assumptions of what they're calling whiteness. Whiteness or white culture in the United States. Now, one of the things that has been difficult within conversations among race is white people don't really think of themselves as part of other white people. I mean, racists do. Racists, and let me just say from the jump, like, if you're a racist, or you have racist or prejudicial thinking, or skin color matters to you, or pigment is an issue for you, like, just stop. I mean, at this point, it's 2020. We know what melanin is. We know how it creates pigment. We understand that race is not biological. It's a social construct. And yes, we do use it to sort of group people, and we do use it to categorize people. But it's like, it's really not, it's nothing. Like, you really could get rid of racism by just getting rid of the concept of race. And as we've referenced on this show before, if we all just kind of behave like Morgan Freeman has asked us to do. Morgan Freeman, in that famous interview with Chris Wallace's dad, his name is Mike Wallace. Thank you. He says, here's how we're going to get rid of racism. We're going to stop talking about it. He said, you're going to stop referring to me as a black man. I'm going to stop referring to you as a white man. You're going to call me Morgan, and I'm going to call you Mike. Like, if we just refer to people and we deal with people on an individual basis, and I don't know, let's imagine if we love God with our heart, mind, and soul, and with all of our strength, and we love our neighbor as ourselves, and we do unto others as we would have them do unto us. But see, even that advice right there that I just gave, according to this infographic, is a part of whiteness. Because Christianity, many of you, I hate to break this to you, you know, people like Reverend Piper and Brother Matthew Shropshire, Pastor Williams, some of the black pastors that I know have called up, some of the black ministers that either have shows here or have called here and have spoken up. I got news for you. According to the National Museum of African American History and Culture, you're practicing not your ancestral religion. You're actually practicing the white man's religion. But here's what they said about white culture. And really, the reason that it doesn't really work is because as you hear these things, the majority of people, whatever race you identify with, majority of people are going to hear these things and understand that these are sort of like values or virtues that will help anyone at any time to be successful. Here's what it says. White dominant culture or whiteness refers to the ways white people and their traditions, attitudes, and ways of life have been normalized over time and are now considered standard practices in the United States. And since white people still hold most of the institutional power in America, we have all internalized some aspect of white culture, including people of color. So now they're basically saying that if you're a POC, a person of color, which includes black, indigenous people, people from southern parts of Asia, basically if you're non-white. So now it's no longer just black and white. It's black and brown and yellow and red against white. But if you exemplify or if you work to try to do any of the things that I'm about to read to you, and this is only part of the infographic, but if you try to read any of these parts, you're somehow or another this is foreign to you, and this is only a part of white culture. Now, do you understand that if like David Duke came out and put an infographic on the internet and people started passing it around, it would sound like what I'm about to read to you. But this is what has happened in our culture when you have become so woke that you're like, it's like a competition now to out-woke everybody. You've become so woke that you're the wokest of the woke. You're the wokey woke. But I mean, this is what racist. This used to be easily identifiable as, oh, that's racist to say that. And now this is excoriated as part of white culture. And I guess, I mean, I don't know. I haven't heard anything from the National Museum of African American History or Culture. I haven't heard them come out and say that what we mean by this is that people of color, especially black people, should reject these things. I haven't heard that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's not what they're saying. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe that's not what they're saying. But they are saying that these things that you're about to hear are part of whiteness, and therefore they're not a part of indigenous, black, or people of color. Rugged individualism. The individual is the primary unit. Self-reliance, independence, and autonomy are highly valued and rewarded. Individuals assume to be in control of their environment. In other words, you get what you deserve. In white culture, the family structure is a nuclear family. Key word there. The father, the mother, 2 or 3 children is the ideal social unit. The husband is the breadwinner and the head of the household. The wife is a homemaker and subordinate to the husband. Children should have their own rooms and be independent. In white culture, we emphasize the scientific method, objective, rational, linear thinking, cause and effect relationships, quantitative emphasis. In terms of our aspects or our emphasis on history in white culture, we base it on Northern European immigrants and their experiences in the United States. We have a heavy focus on the British Empire and the primacy of Western culture, Western civilization, Greek and Roman and Judeo-Christian tradition. It goes on to say that white culture has a Protestant work ethic where we really believe that hard work is the key to success. that we should work before we play, and that if you don't meet your goals, you didn't work hard enough. Not if you didn't hit your goals, we blame somebody else. But the biggest one, and what I realized in thinking about this particular aspect of where we are right now on the back of this, it was the George Floyd incident that really, that was the spark that kind of lit a firestorm. But it was long before his tragic death. There had been a real undercurrent of anti-American, anti-white, and especially anti-Christianity. I mean, if you think about what people were saying about Barack Obama and how anti-Christian he was, how pro-Muslim he was just a couple of years ago, this idea of being anti-Christian really struck a chord with me. The goal is total repudiation of Christian civilization in the name of racial justice and white privilege. And the thing of it is this, that those who are calling for this cultural eradication are actually the very people in dire need of the culture that they're trying to repudiate. The very things that they despise are being used in attempts to destroy it. And this happens really with every revolution. I mean, think about what's left from the Cuban Revolution that was built by the culture that is destroyed. And the same is true with every revolution that has ever existed. The first thing Mao did when he came into power in China was he had a cultural revolution where he completely erased the history. He completely obliterated Mao's wife has said we killed God. They got rid of the church and all images of that. It was a cultural revolution. I tend to agree with something that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said. I think he gets it exactly right about our nation's founding principles. And I think that this administration, probably because the president himself is probably a little bit ignorant about the history of America in great detail. But we always heard Reagan. We always heard Reagan quoting some wisdom from previous administrations, from previous presidents. He quoted principles and ideals. He was constantly using his bully pulpit to remind America of the principles that make America great. Not the people, not the politicians, not the parties, the principles. The principles are the things that make America great. And so I think Secretary of State Mike Pompeo gets it right. Here's what he said, quote, "Now it's true that at our nation's founding, our country fell far short of securing the rights of all. The evil institution of slavery was our nation's gravest departure from these founding principles. We expelled Native Americans from their ancestral lands, and our foreign policy, too, has not always comported with the idea of sovereignty embedded in the core of our founding. But crucially, the nation's founding principles gave us the standard by which we could see the gravity of our failings and a political framework that gave us the tools to ultimately abolish slavery and enshrine into law equality without regard to race. You don't always hear these ground truths today, nor do you hear about the greatest strides our nation has made to realize the promise of our founding and a more perfect union." Close quote. Now, it took a long time. It really did take a long time to remove that Christian foundation from the United States. It began with the Constitution itself that opens with "We the People." And it's sort of the ultimate moral and governmental foundation of the nation. We the people. This is a government founded on, for, and by the people. The religious and the cultural views of the people, though, have changed. Thus, cancel culture now is represented by we the people, who put our existing government in power. Our education system has made sure of that, as we willingly sent our children to be brainwashed by our nation's enemies. Yes, I know that there are exceptions, but there are fewer and fewer of them. The National Museum of African American History and Culture has made this abundantly clear. That you don't need a better example than the one that I'm getting ready to show you. On their chart for whiteness and white culture, I don't want you to read it and necessarily be shocked, but I want you to be doggone mad. I do want you to be mad, and I want you to do something about it. The easiest thing that we can do to push back on this type of thing, that this whole period of time that we're living in right now, is in November, we have to vote out every Democrat on November 3rd. And even if, like me, President Trump is not my favorite president. I didn't vote for him the first time. I'm going to vote for him this time. So even if you don't like President Trump, you've got to vote for him. You can't vote for Joe Biden. And you got to remove your children from these government public schools. Like right now, if you can homeschool your children right now because of the pandemic, it's a great time. It's a really good time to find a way to get your kids out of these schools of indoctrination, where the school systems are there more for the teachers' unions and the jobs of teachers, not for children. And by the teachers' unions, these schools are available to give donations directly to the Democrat Party. You look at every major teacher union across the United States, and almost 100% of their donations of their union dues that are collected go directly to the Democrat Party or some organization or some politician that's a Democrat. They don't go to Republicans. They are the indoctrination arm of the Democratic Party. And you need to think twice even about the colleges that you send your kids to. Now, this is the one that jumped out at me. They said that according to white culture, that the religion of white culture is Christianity. It's the norm. And that anything other than Judeo-Christian tradition is foreign. And there is no tolerance or deviation from single God concept. So what the African American Museum of History and Culture has basically said, that if you practice a Judeo-Christian monotheism, the belief in one true God, that is white. That is whiteness that you are practicing. So either, I don't know if they're calling for a return to the polytheism of pagan gods of a time foregone in Africa. I don't know if they're calling for, again, I don't know. I can assume, I can speculate, but this is, to me, this showed that this was a direct attack. There aren't a lot of good college choices today. We know the entire system is corrupt. I mean, right now with kids not returning to school, like, why would you spend $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 for a piece of paper that has the name of a school on it when these kids are now able to stay at home and take the same courses because of the COVID-19 pandemic? These schools are showing that they are way overpriced, and they're just ripping people off. Ripping the kids off educationally because they're turning them into these left-wing Antifa Marxist lunatics, but even more of a ripoff to the people paying for it. And the people who go out and get the loans, they're 100% guaranteed by the federal government, because under the Obama administration, they nationalized the student loan business. So the university just can continue to increase. They just can continue to increase their tuition. No one's there to check the tuition except like the Board of Regents or the Board of Governors of an individual university. Maybe at a state university level, they're able to do something. But other than that, you really can't. And these professors just get paid more and more and more to just pollute the minds of our young people. And they know what they're doing. All this stuff that's going on in Portland, all these riots, all this damage that's been done in the name of racial justice is a farce. And these leftist professors, the ones who act like, I don't understand how they're doing this. This is not liberalism. No, this is what liberalism has birthed. This is what conservatives have been for years, trying to get people to understand that this is what was coming. The entire system is corrupt. And your children might actually be better suited for industries that don't require a college education. Calling Mike Rowe, dirty jobs, call up. Hey. It seems that there was so much pushback to this chart that the National Museum of African American History and Culture made the following statement yesterday. And this is why I said I haven't seen them make a statement like about the intention. All they did was apologize for some controversy. Here's what they said. Since yesterday, certain content in the Talking About Race portal has been the subject of questions that we have taken seriously. We have listened to the public sentiment, and we have removed the chart that does not contribute to the productive discussions we had intended. Oh no, to the contrary. National Museum of African American History and Culture. Your graphic yesterday is very helpful. In fact, it may be the most helpful infographic we have in the conversation of race. Because again, you are doing the work of the Ku Klux Klan. You are carrying water for Richard Spencer and the alt-right and the new neo-nationalist and people like David Duke. You are so woke that African American Museum of History and Culture has become so woke that they're white supremacists. They're white supremacists. This is almost like the reverse. No, this is the Clayton Bigsby Dave Chappelle skit of the blind black KKK member, the black supremacist. There's a lot of bad language and it's a hugely offensive skit, but if you get a chance, just go see it. It's a black kid who was blind at birth, raised by racist white supremacists, and he became one of the top Klan members. And then he found out when he ripped his hood off in front of everybody that he was actually black. That's what this is like. You can't make this stuff. Like Dave Chappelle wrote what's happening right now as a skit, as a comedy skit over a decade ago. Almost like to clown how woke our current situation is. But that little statement that they made, what that really means is that we got caught. We still believe all of this, and we're going to still continue to push these ridiculous ideas on your children. They are the future, we say, but we don't really believe it. And we don't believe in our future children, but we really do believe in this garbage. And you and your kind are going to die off, and we're going to inherit all the stuff that we say is a problem. And of course, we'll destroy it, and we'll turn the United States into a third world nation like Somalia. But we would have gotten rid of your God and established a new God in our image. When I saw the whiteness chart, I mean, the first thing I thought was how stereotypical it was of black people. Like if you just took this chart and you made the opposite. Like think about if you said that black people are not individuals, they're not self-reliant, they're actually dependent. If you said that they see the nuclear family thing, we know that Black Lives Matter, the organization, wants to disrupt the nuclear family, the Western nuclear family, because they're trained Marxists. It's a Marxist revolutionary organization. So they're in lockstep with what's going on right now. Dr. Robert Gagnon had a good quote about this particular chart put out by the African American Museum of History and Culture. He said, quote, "If a white supremacist group said that whiteness was characterized by rugged individualism, self-reliance, emphasis on the scientific method by way of objective, rational, linear thinking, preparedness, like planning for the future, self-controlled, like delayed gratification, a strong work ethic, like working before playing, optimism, thinking that tomorrow will be better, monotheism, focus on a single God concept, punctuality, following a rigid or following a schedule, politeness, like be polite, thereby implying that blackness entails dependency on handouts, irrational thinking, short-sightedness, an absence of self-control, laziness, pessimism, polytheism, animism, lateness, and rudeness. It would be roundly denounced for racist stereotypes. And the graphic that this thing is made from is actually based on a piece written by Judy Katz in 1990 called Some Aspects and Assumptions of White Culture in the United States. And ironically, Judith Katz is white. Now, I know that it is going to be a bunch of these white privilege types, these white fragility, self-loathing white people out there, and probably a lot of self-loathing race grifters and hucksters within the black community who are more than likely getting paid very good salaries and living off of the fruit of the whiteness culture that they despise. And this whiteness culture has had a hand in putting this chart together. I wonder if they show up on time for work, since time seems to be a big problem for the critics of whiteness culture. Dr. Gagnon continues and gets to the heart of what's really being attacked. And if you didn't hear anything so far that I've said, this is probably the most important part of what I want you to think about. This graphic targets Christianity, which, by the way, has its origins in the Middle East, even though it's considered the religion of whiteness. Holidays are based on Christian religions. History is focused on the primacy of Judeo-Christian tradition, where Christianity is the norm. And anything other than Judeo-Christian tradition is foreign. There's no tolerance for deviation of a single God. And attention to a nuclear family where the husband is breadwinner and head of household, wife is the homemaker, subordinate to the husband, as much a feature of traditional African society as traditional Christian European society, mind you. Christianity at its inception was as African as it was European. And Christianity, moreover, continues to flourish on both African and African American societies, more so than it does in modern white European society. Africa today is as Christian as it is Muslim, at about 40 to 45% each. 85% of the African American population identifies as Christian here in the United States, as opposed to 1% Muslim, 1% other religions, 11% unaffiliated, and 2% agnostic or atheist. So how is Christianity and whiteness coterminous? How are they uniquely linked together? And then there's the charge about aggressiveness. I don't understand how aggressiveness is not a feature of the intolerant, hard-left Black Lives Matter organization and Antifa. Many black groups on college campuses are very antagonistic toward other blacks, to say nothing of whites, who don't adopt their narrow, hard-left party line. African Americans in this country also account for 52% of all murder, voluntary manslaughter, and robbery, theft with intimidation or violence. I mean, Museum of African American History and Culture. Are we not considering those things aggressiveness? Is that only found? Maybe we should ask Nick Cannon. Maybe we should ask Nick Cannon, because Nick Cannon says that white people's lack of melanin causes us to be barbarians. And somehow or another, if you have a lot of melanin, you have soul. I don't know. Again, if you're not aware of what we're up against in this next election, then you got to get yourself educated. Never Trumpers are worse than our democratic enemies. And they're naive at best and downright delusional at worst. Now, as it pertains to the church, there is a particular eschatology. There is a fictional theology that somehow or another the Bible is interpreted by the use of a newspaper, not a commentary, not a biblical encyclopedia, not a Bible dictionary, not a good study Bible, but like a newspaper. And people look at the events that are going on in the world right now, and they look at those events and they try then to make sense out of them by trying to import these events into the text so that they can make sense of the text. So there's this idea that things have to get worse before they get better. Things have to get worse before the return of Jesus. The entire Left Behind, Tim LaHaye, Max Lucado, Late Great Planet Earth, classical Darby, Schofield, dispensational theology means that you could just stay on the bench. You don't have to get involved in what's going on in the country right now. It means you can just sort of check out and just pray Maranatha. Ask that the Lord come and just take us out of here. You can just be flatly escapist. And if we do that in this time, we sort of relegate the next several decades, the future country that we leave behind. Because we inherited this country from our forefathers, and they from theirs, and so on and so forth. And it would be the easiest thing in the world to just sit back and do nothing and believe that within the next 5 to 10 years or less, the Lord was returning. For everyone who's a believer, that would be great. But we've got about 1,000 predictions since the mid-1800s of when Jesus was going to return, when the secret rapture was going to happen. We've had horrible events. People have predicted and named who the Antichrist was, only to be proven false. 1988 was supposed to be significant. 1948 was supposed to be significant. All of these different dates are supposed to be significant. See, if you think we're going to be just taken out of here pretty soon, then you can just sort of see this and be encouraged by all these things that happen. Because, well, it just means the Lord's coming back in any minute. But if you see this as, hey, it's our job to steward this that we've been given, to whom much is given, much is required. We can't take a back seat to this. We have to continue to be in the driver's seat. We have to understand that for those of us who try to live out kingdom principles, for those of us who try to represent King Jesus to the fullest ability, for those of us out here that are loving people in a self-sacrificial way, we're loving our neighbors, we're loving our enemies. We also have to take the responsibility that comes with living in the greatest nation, most powerful, richest, wealthiest nation on planet Earth. Because a Marxist worldview, one that is atheistic, one that is built out of revenge, one that causes people to be envious and covetous of others. At the core of Marx's, Karl Marx gets characterized, he gets caricatured, if you will, oftentimes by this one statement. The one statement is, to whom much is, to those who have need, from those who have, to those who have need. You've heard some variation of that little statement. Basically, if you don't have anything, we can take from those who have more than enough. We can take from them and give to them, and we can create this level playing field, this equality. But that is a very covetous, very envious It's a very victim. The idea that someone else has your stuff causes you to be a victim, causes you to feel like you've been victimized. And if you've been victimized, it makes you very angry. And if you're angry, you're more likely to do something. So this idea that we can just kind of sit on the side and watch a worldview sweep over the United States of America, as it has been. Listen, let's be surprised and let's be excited when our Lord returns. But let's live right now as though he's going to tarry for another 2,000 years. And let's fight for this place that was built. This is a struggle that we face right now and has been going on for Western civilization. Western civilization, a civilization that's been built. It's a civilized nation. And it's Western. It's not built from tradition coming out of the East. It wasn't built from ideas that come out of Saharan or Sub-Saharan or Southern Africa. This is Western culture. This is not even about whiteness. Yes, there's a lot of Western civilization that comes out of or is Eurocentric. But the United States is very welcoming. It always has been. It's always been open to immigration. Those people who want to come here and adopt American values. And American has been the strongest proponent of Western civilization's best ideas. It's always been the nation that has led and been in the forefront. This is what's at stake over these next couple of months. This is what we have to be fighting for. This isn't just a fight any longer for the United States of America. We've got people like AOC and Bernie Sanders who are open socialists. They are willing to take Marx's ideas, take them and put them into government, and then implement those on the general populace of the United States of America. Karl Marx is completely antithetical, his ideas, with the ideas of liberty that were written by Jefferson, Franklin, Madison, Hamilton, Washington, many of the founding fathers. The ideas of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Pursuit of happiness is private property. Private property is probably the biggest way you can tell the difference between socialism and capitalism or free enterprise inside of an economy and inside of a society is the right to private property. If you have a society where people have the right to private property, you're going to have freedom. You're going to have opportunity. If you have a civilization where you have where the government owns the means of capital, meaning they own the land or they own the labor, or they own the land, labor, and the capital. They control the money. You have no freedom. The individuals have no freedom. You exist to benefit the state. So you have to be aware of what's at stake here in the coming several months here in the United States. And you can't get caught up in and you can't get caught up in and see all the mess of the Black Lives Matter and the race stuff. All of that, believe it or not, is a distraction for, all of that is a distraction. I want to go into the chat room right now. Let's see here. I had a couple people making some comments, so let's see. BLM is not financed by black folks. That's in a lot of ways that's correct. So if you go back to I guess Ferguson or maybe Trayvon Martin, you had a lot of corporations that started dumping money into Black Lives Matters, the organization. So they've got about a 5 or 6 year head start in fundraising where corporations are just dumping money into the Black Lives Matter movement. And they're just making business decisions. But yes, they've been given a ton of money. Also, the fundraising arm, what they're calling the philanthropic arm of the Black Lives Matter movement, is an organization called Thousand Currents. Susan Rosenberg sits on the board of directors for 1,000 Currents. Just Google her name and you'll see that she is a convicted terrorist who used to be a member of the Weather Underground, and she was sentenced to serve basically the rest of her life in prison for the death of some I believe it's some police officers or some security guards in New York. But she was found guilty for she had a bunch of explosives when she was arrested. She went away from prison, was going to basically be in prison for the rest of her life. And the last day of the Clinton administration, President Clinton pardoned or commuted her sentence on the last day of his day in office, commuted her sentence. She got out of prison, and she's been out there raising money. A convicted terrorist, a convicted domestic terrorist working to raise money for, among other things, the Black Lives Matter movement. And of course, we know the Black Lives Matter movement, the three founders, the three women, radical feminists. Two of them are lesbians. Both of the two of the lesbians are married to women. One is married to a trans man, a woman who lives or identifies as a man. And then the third one is just a radical international feminist. She's a first-generation Nigerian immigrant. Her parents immigrated here from Nigeria, and she was born here in the States, but she still identifies more with her Nigerian roots than her American roots. But these women are trained Marxists. They don't care about men. They're using people like Michael Brown and George Floyd. They're using these people to advance their agendas. It's financed by the global elite. In some ways, yes, but in other ways, no. Just know that this is the fight of our where we are right now is an amazing place in our nation's history, and you cannot at this time decide to take a seat. Many of us who have been on the front line of government over the last 15 years, going all the way back into the last year of the Bush bailouts and him bailing out the banks and Bernanke and fiddling around with the money. We've got a major reckoning that is coming in this country with what the Federal Reserve's doing, with all the quantitative easing. We used to talk about this on a regular basis, the amount of debt that we're racking up, and they're talking about giving out more stimulus. And remember, these are Republicans that are doing this. I don't know how to basically say we need to. I mean, I've said it already. We need to vote for Republicans, but I don't understand how we vote for Republicans and then we somehow or another they do everything that we would expect of Democrats to do, and it just feels like Trump's not draining the swamp. It feels like he's making the swamp actually a little bit deeper. I'm hopeful that if he gets reelected and he doesn't have to worry about campaigning or ever getting reelected again, I'm hoping that he just goes and says, listen, I'm going to fix everything. Just like I said I would. I don't care how it gets done, but we need to get it fixed. We need to fix America. It's monetary policy. We need to fix the interest rates are going to have to go up. We can't stay at 0% interest. We can't keep printing money. We're going to have to draw some of this money. The stock markets, we're going to have to be willing to let the stock market go down some. It's right now it's being artificially propped up. All we're doing is blowing more air into the bubble that we have, and it's getting bigger, and it's going to crash even harder. There's a reckoning coming, and this COVID stuff only makes it more difficult. Have grace dealing with this COVID stuff. Please have grace. Wash your hands, social distance, wear a mask if you're going to be indoors. Don't see it as somehow an attack on your liberty and your freedom. It's not. It's just, listen, if masks don't work, then surgeons don't need to wear masks anymore. Surgeons wear the same little piddly masks that they're asking us to wear because it's good enough to keep whatever droplets they have and whatever sickness they have in their body out of the most vulnerable person in a surgical room, the patient. So that's what the masks are for. You're wearing the mask to, if you're either asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic and you don't know that you've been infected, you're just keeping it and slowing down the infection rate. That's all we're trying to do here. We don't have to be any more difficult than that. It's not a conspiracy, so don't make it one. Be encouraged. Western civilization is under attack. Let's be mindful of that.